This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
It's your call. Do we need high-speed rail? The consultation into that new line planned between London and Birmingham goes on today. It's launched today. Now, if it goes ahead, we'll get trains that can travel at 225 miles per hour. Birmingham to London would be less than an hour, with much faster links between north and south. The government says 8,000 jobs will be created. It'll boost the economy. Opponents say we cannot afford it. It will destroy the environment. There will be huge disruption while it's being built. Supporters of the plan say we are way behind other European countries already. Maybe you have experiences of being on those wonderful or otherwise trains in France and Germany. They say it's high time we threw some money into this idea. France, Germany, Spain as well all have high-speed networks. You can get from Paris all the way down to the south of France in just 3 hours. People commute across massive distances to get to work. Do we need high-speed rail?
This is 5 Live.
Right, we've got Julie Mills, Director of Green Gauge 21, a group set up to develop the case for high-speed lines. Hello, Julie.
Good morning.
And Christian Walmar, who is a transport commentator. Good to speak to you again, Christian, as ever, as always. Peter's in Shropshire. Good morning, Peter. Other calls coming in as well. 0500 909 693. Hi, Peter. We're talking about very, very fast trains today. The start of a consultation with a high-speed rail link between London and Birmingham. It'll boost the economy and create jobs, say the government. It'll mean fast journeys. It'll be very expensive as well, and it will be disruptive for the environment, tearing through Warwickshire and Buckinghamshire, some lovely countryside as well. Opponents say it's a waste of money. Is it a waste of money, Christian?
I think it is, I'm afraid, and I think even worse, it's going to take away funds from the rest of the railway network, and that's one of the main reasons why I'm against it, because it will just absorb vast amounts of both capital and subsidy for years and years to come and mess up the whole railway network.
But, OK, Julie, you come straight back on that.
Well, actually, I think recent experience has shown that doesn't have to be the case. At the moment, we're spending a lot of money on Crossrail in London, which is costing about the same as High Speed 2 will cost to take a new route from London to the West Midlands. And we're still seeing money going into the transport system. We built High Speed 1, and similarly, that came out of a separate budget. It didn't take funding away from the rest of the transport.
Julie, sell us the idea, inspire us.
Well, basically, we need high-speed rail because we need extra transport capacity in this country. And high-speed rail is the most effective way of doing that. It's going to be fast, it's going to be reliable, it's going to provide much more capacity than upgrading the existing network can do. And experience from other European countries and Asia shows that it can have a really transformational effect to our economies.
And if you have the ability to get from Birmingham to London in 49 minutes, it's going to be a real boost for the economy in the Midlands, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. It'll give businesses and people confidence to locate in the Midlands, knowing that they can access their markets in the South East and London much more effectively than they can at the moment. So it'll actually help to rebalance development to the Midlands and the North away from the overheated South East.
Christian?
Well, two things. It's very interesting that the HS2 people are now very much emphasising regeneration, because at the beginning they used to emphasise the environment, and we might come back to that later, but really there is no environmental case for this line. But regeneration also is not that certain. If you improve transport links between a relatively deprived area and a rich area, you do not necessarily bring wealth to the rich area. You may indeed attract more people and resources out of that area because it's easier to get into London. So this might be very good for London, but it might not necessarily be very good for the regions.
OK, let's bring in Jenny and Peter. Julie very much still there. Peter, allow me to defer to Jenny first. Jenny in Dunsmore, near Wendover. Are you excited by the prospect of this high-speed link?
I think excitement is probably not the right word.
OK.
Mortified, I think, is probably a better word.
Why are you mortified?
I'm mortified for the country. I'm mortified that politicians are seeming to do something that they have not proved is in the national interest. That's going to cost a huge amount of money.
But they have these high-speed rail links in Germany
and
already,
in Spain. It depends on your definition of a high-speed rail link.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you look at other places in Europe, high speed is not 250 miles an hour. It's a lot slower than 250 miles an hour. And although they're saying, they have it in Europe, I understand in Holland they're under financial difficulty, having opened it a year ago. And I understand that from Spain, they can never see an end of subsidising the high-speed rail. And they're taking money away from other projects.
Peter, what do you think?
I just find it very amazing. I regularly commute down into London, and I use the Wolverhampton line. And in my mind, the lady who came in earlier basically saying, we proved case studies, and it's a less expensive option. I do not see that. From Euston, you could put 2 additional lines in, up and down, at half pay. I don't know cost, obviously, in detail. But the other thing which really worries me, if I take anything from someone like Virgin Rail, is the absolute cost, because you cannot get a cheap ticket before 9:30. They have a peak time from 3:15 till 6:30. They have 4 first-class carriages and 4 second-class carriages. It is a very expensive option, and you're telling me that someone's going to spend £33 billion and you're going to get cheap tickets up and down to Birmingham. It's not going to happen.
Julie?
Well, actually, the studies that we've carried out have shown that high-speed rail doesn't have to be more expensive than the existing railway. That there's a good business case, even with similar average fares to fares that are paid currently. Now, Peter's got a point. Peak fares are expensive, but actually, more than 80% of people don't actually travel on the full fares on the railway. Most people travel on discounted fares. So we're talking on average £40 per journey.
Excuse me, if you want to get to London in a reasonable time in the morning and get back to spend some time with your family, you cannot do it within the peak which is offered at the moment, because you cannot get a cheap fare. London at the moment from Birmingham is about an hour and 15. You have to go after 9:30, which means you get to London for about 11 o'clock. So that means you have 3 hours turnaround before 3 o'clock to get a train back at a reasonable time. Otherwise, you have to wait till 6:30, 7:15, which means you're back at 10 o'clock and 9 o'clock. That is not an option for your average family, because they ramp it up during peak, and that's what they do. And you tell me, oh yeah, but 80% of fares, 80% of the people don't travel at that time. It's not an option to get in and up in London from Birmingham and Wolverhampton on a reasonable time.
Christian, you were mentioning the environmental aspect of this. Let me bring Jenny back in on that, because you live in a very lovely part of the world, Jenny.
I mean, when I talk about the environmental aspects, I am talking about the impact on the AONB. I'm talking about, the destruction of ancient woodlands and ancient lanes and the loss of peace and tranquility. But the environmental issues are much greater than even those losses to the AONB. The case for carbon emissions is very dubious in terms whether or not it's not going to, according to HS2 themselves, they say it's only broadly carbon neutral. There are huge environmental issues that will be looked at in great detail. We need to see what the Hammond is saying today, because we understand they've obviously changed it from the last document they brought out in March last year. We've got the issue in the Chilterns of the aquifers, the impact of tunnelling in where we're supplying water to London, a number of issues. And all that we've always only required is that people, they keep saying that we're NIMBYs, but there are huge vested interests. And I suspect even Green Gauge 21, Julie may say that they are a vested interest.
Christian Wilmore, are you not excited by the prospect of, say, north of Birmingham, one line would head to an East Midlands station, Sheffield and Leeds, and the journey time from Sheffield or Leeds to London would fall to 1 hour 20 minutes. Manchester to London would fall, I read, to 1 hour 20 minutes. This is extraordinary.
Well, look, the train spotter in me is jolly excited about it, but
that's quite a lot of you, Christian, isn't it?
No, well, less of me than you might think. The hard-bitten economist, which is what I studied at university, thinks this is a nonsense. Look, first of all, there's a lot of points there, but first of all, we have much better train service than other countries, other than their high-speed lines. That's a really important point. You can get from London to Leeds in 2 hours, London to Manchester in just over 2 hours already. So we do have very fast, efficient, well-used services. And there's a lot of potential extra capacity without doing anything. One of your callers, Peter, mentioned the fact that, Virgin has 4 first-class carriages and 4 second. Well, virtually every train I ever go on Virgin, the first class is pretty empty. If we really wanted to boost capacity, we could turn over some of those to second class, add a couple of carriages in, and you'd find you've boosted capacity by maybe 60-70% without spending an enormous amount of money.
Jack, we shall call you Jack because that's what you're calling yourself, a senior transport engineer dealing with the motorway network, calling us from Nottingham. Jack, hello to you.
Yeah, hi.
Do we need this?
No, what we need to do is to make better use of the existing corridors that we have. We've got the M6 and the M1 running pretty much aligned with railway tracks. So what we should be doing is to use better interchanges and to improve the corridors. When I sit on a couple of American government committees that are looking into this kind of thing, it's integrated corridor management, and they are saying, you don't build more roads, don't build more rail, just to make more use of what you've got.
Ryan?
Hello there.
You approve of it, don't you?
I do approve of it, yeah. I work for a train company in the south of England, and I travel up to Birmingham quite often, and obviously the railway, when it was built on a Victorian infrastructure, and it's full to capacity. There is no additional pathways for extra trains, so High Speed 2 can only be considered an added bonus.
Any comments, anyone?
Well, I'd like to say that those that are opposing this current proposal are not against improving rail networks. And what we're saying is the alternative should be properly considered. And rather than coming up with a solution, as was HS2 proposal, they should have started and analysed properly what they needed.
Well, actually, the government has looked into the alternatives to high-speed rail pretty authoritatively, and they've published their studies. They've looked at upgrading the motorway network, they've looked at upgrading the railway network, looked at building a new
came up
slower speed
with
line.
a better benefit-cost ratio than HS2. It
Well,
was a cheaper, better idea to improve the existing railway than actually to build this high-speed line, and much cheaper. 2 or 3 billion instead of 17.
Well,
in the long run,
the comparative economics are questionable, as you know, Christian. But High Speed 2 provides vastly more capacity than upgrading the existing network can do.
Did anyone give a figure on that, though, between the two?
High Speed 2 provides more capacity than this country will ever need. With the changes in working patterns, with telecommunications, with the economy, the capacity, it will be a white elephant.
Well, I don't believe that's true.
I know you don't, Julie.
We've had IT for 20 years now. We're not seeing video conferencing reducing the need to travel. People need face-to-face contact. It's our human nature. We need to get together to do business for our leisure activities.
Sorry, this is Patrick. People need travel, but is 20 minutes really going to make that much difference, given the amount of money that's going to cost and the alternative?
And it's going to be late anyway.
Well, precisely. It's neither here nor there, is it? I mean, we're going to create, how many did you say, 800 jobs?
No.
Can I ask Julie something? Do you really want people to commute between London and Birmingham? Do
Well,
you
they
think
will.
that
Of course
really
they will.
is a good idea? Because
Well, who the hell wants to work in Birmingham anyway?
Well, if you don't, if the line isn't
Birmingham's a
used for
happening
that-
place right now.
No, I work there.
And I've worked there. I love Birmingham. I've got to say, I worked there for a long time as well. Often.
But the evidence appears to show, and I don't know whether Christian's already said this, the evidence appears to show that it will draw people to London. It draws people to the most advantageous economic place, and not the others. So it's rather than regenerate Birmingham, or not necessarily Birmingham, but Glasgow or Manchester, it may not work that way.
It won't work though at all. I mean, if you look at, Licky was saying before, the high-speed rail down to the south of France. If you look at France, it's a big square country. We are a long, narrow country. There is only one way to go, up and down. And we've pretty much done that now. All we need to do now is make better use of what we've got, not try to make more of it in terms of concrete or rail.
Yeah.
But when you consider, obviously, if you were to upgrade the existing system, how much it would cost the government in land grabs and things like that, obviously I feel that High Speed 2 is a valid option, because if you look at it in terms of land grabs and moving people and moving stations and the railway as it stands now, it's going to end up costing more.
I don't think that's what they're talking about.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
it's interesting. I'd like to make a point about land grab. Under freedom of information, HS2 and DFT cannot tell us how much land they will need for this current
How much
proposal.
land will you need for this, Julie? Just briefly, and then I want to speak more to you and Christian after we've had the travel news. How much land will you need to grab?
Well, High Speed 2 takes a 22-metre wide strip of land along its length.
Yeah, and
in areas like the Chilterns.
And the roads.
Well, yeah, of course there'll need to be access to it during construction. That needs to be managed, and we're going to see more details from the government today.
Yeah, which is what I'm saying.
Well, they didn't know it 2 weeks ago.
Well, we'll find out today.
Yeah,
Thank you all very much,
make
Christian.
better use of what you've got.
Christian, stay where you are. Thank you so much to our other callers as well. Christian, stay where you are. Julie, likewise. It's 9:24. Mark in Portsmouth. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
Hi. Sitting in traffic, are you?
Yes, still.
Yes. Whereabouts exactly?
Just past Guildford.
All right. Okay. Should we be doing more travel by rail?
There should be a lot more travel by rail. The whole strategy is completely wrong. They're not looking at what the public really want, and to invest 33 billion on a fast rail network is just a complete nonsense when they haven't got a grip of the situation to incentivise people like me to get on a train from, say, Portsmouth to London at a proper economical rate. Now, they can do it in Europe, but they can't do it here. I mean, it's just a total nonsense. The return should be something like £15 to £20 to London, return by train. 50 quid if you go before 9 o'clock, if you arrive in London after 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
It is just a complete and utter nonsense. And for them to start suggesting 33 billion on a fast rail network when they haven't even got the strategy right, they're not driving sufficient people off the road without talking about penalties, is just complete and utter nonsense.
Okay, back to Julian. So stay there. Back to Julie and Christian in a second. Dora in Bridport.
Hello.
Hello, Dora. How are you feeling about this?
Quite incensed. I came in on the conversation, actually, but I just have a query. Is the government putting any money into this, or is it all by the rail company?
Where's the money coming from, Christian?
It's going to be all from taxpayers. There's no way that they're going to get very much private investment in this for a very simple reason, that big infrastructure schemes like this have to be paid for by government. Government paid for HS2. It pays for most major improvements on the railway, and it will pay for this.
Well, then my blood pressure's gone up even a few more degrees.
Julie, is there anything you can do as somebody who supports this? You're part of the campaign group, director of Green Gauge 21. You're set up to develop the case for high-speed rail lines. Can you do anything to lower our Dora's blood pressure?
No, I don't. Well, I don't. If I may interrupt, I don't think she can.
Well, let's see if she can, Dora. And then she can say something to you.
Right,
this is her challenge, and then you can tell us.
Okay.
We'll monitor your blood pressure, Julie.
Well, Christian's right in one perspective that yes, this is going to require investment from the government.
Calm Dora down on this.
Well, okay, but the way to calm Dora down on that is there is considerable value in high speed rail. It will be very attractive for people to use, and operationally it will return significant amount of funds. If we look at the experience of High Speed 1 in this country, which cost £5 billion to build, the government recently sold a 30-year concession for £2.1 billion. So it's recouped
which
a
is
substantial
enormous
proportion
loss,
already.
Julie. I mean, they're never going to get very much more money
well,
for
sure,
this.
but people say that cost £5 billion. Well, actually, the net cost to government is already an awful lot less, and they've recouped that money just a couple of years after it opened.
Well, may I come in? My points are...
Are you feeling better?
No, my points are that we haven't the money to do this in the first place. If like in my own household budget, I see something luxury like that might be a help in all these kind of things. If I haven't got the money in that, I couldn't afford to do it, and neither can this country. First of all, because we're in such an economical bad climate, which they can't afford money for charity grants, they can't afford money for poor children, they can't afford money to put into all the infrastructure of our country, whether it's the NHS or education or whatever it might be.
The Transport Secretary, Philip Hammond, if I may, he says the high-speed line will mean a £44 billion boost for our economy.
Can I talk about that?
I don't.
You don't buy that?
We haven't got the money to do it in the first place, so therefore you have to cut your cloth according to its size. And this government just won't do that.
Christian.
Yeah, most of those benefits, I'll tell you, they do something called a business case. And most of the benefits in the business case, the cost is pretty obvious, but the benefits consist of very small time savings of people who take this train. So they're then kind of reckoned.
Time is money, Christian.
£70,000 a year. That's what the average salary they reckon of the people whose time is saved, and they all add all that up. So if 1 million people save half an hour each. That's, half a million people that, work it out at £70,000 a year. And that's how they work out the benefits.
Julie,
it's not a benefit to society.
If this is the case, Julie, that's a preposterous con.
Well, it's not a preposterous con.
Yes,
it's actually the rail industry, the transport sector, actually has a very good way of developing business cases that other parts of the public sector don't have to do. So we're pretty sophisticated at doing.
Where's
that.
the saving then?
Well,
44 billion. Where's that come from?
Well, this is actually the improvement to business productivity from having faster, more reliable journeys, and it's a benefit to all of us from having faster journeys. There is a real economic gain there, and this will last for 50, 60 years. The business case assumes that benefits will carry on that long, and our railways are going 200 years after they were built, so there's no reason why high-speed rail shouldn't have an impact way into the future.
But what about the social costs to all the communities are going to be disrupted? What about the aesthetic costs that would be to all the countryside, apart from anything else? And the fact that we don't have money in the first place. If the government wasn't having to make any of these cuts and everything, there'd be no problem. But we don't have the money in the coffers in the first place. So why are we going to be so extravagant in doing something like this, which eventually will surely hardly save anything, when we can't help those who are in desperate need now in our own country more than having half an hour cut off a rail journey? I'm sorry, you'll never change my mind, but I just have to share what I feel.
Well, sure, absolutely. But the serious money on high-speed 2 won't need to be spent until 2015, and by this stage, the government intends that we'll have sorted out our public finances, and we're already spending £2 billion a year on Crossrail. We're already spending that kind of money on major projects in London, and this is time to rebalance the shape of our infrastructure spending and get benefits to the Midlands and the North, not just in the South.
Can I join in here?
Who's that?
It's Mark.
But I'll tell you what, Mark. Make a brief comment in a second. But we found somebody else who supports it.
Well, that's fine.
Brian in London.
I've got a changeable mind on it, by the way.
Have you? Well, see,
yeah,
listen to Brian in the City of London. Brian, by the way, you're sitting in traffic, Mark, are you? By the way. You said you were...
I've pulled over.
Well, somebody has just tweeted me to Nikki A.A. Campbell to say he's not sitting in traffic, he is traffic. So that's a point for you. Anyway, Brian in the City of London. Brian, on you go. You're for it.
Yeah, I certainly am. Thank you for letting me on, Nikki.
Well, we're delighted. We were looking for somebody who was for it, and we've got you.
Well, I've got to say, mate, there's probably a few people that have got nice gardens in the Chalfonts and the Chilterns that are probably not for it. But we need massive change onto trains. To fly between Birmingham and London and Manchester and London, that's just ridiculous. You're looking at 4 hours with at the airport. They drop you off outside town on a train. I've got a great idea. People worrying about cost. Why not make it a line where we can all invest in? And if you invest in it, you get cheaper fares. Here's another idea. Only 10% first class on it as well. So we can get more people on it. And let's make it easy to get between all the big cities. It's silly flying. It's silly sitting in traffic. You're looking at cost. What about the cost of everyone sitting there twiddling their thumbs, sitting in traffic all day? Now, I understand there's people going to be upset that they're going to lose their lovely view. I've got friends that live in the Chilterns and the Chalfonts. But the thing is, we're all in this together. They weren't so worried when they want to knock my house down and build a third runway. But to be honest, so I'm a bit one-sided.
Every time you say the Chalfonts, I have to change my position of sitting. But yeah, I know what you mean.
It's lovely out there, mate.
Yeah. Anyone want to respond to that?
Right. Yeah, I'd like to.
Who's that?
Mark.
Mark. Go on, Mark.
The reason being, I'm in one of the densest parts of the country, and that includes education. And what I'm concerned about is the emotional rhetoric that's come out there. The reason being is that people have already invested, haven't they? You don't need a separate share scheme because it's people's taxes that are paying for all this. And my major... Look, I'll let you finish, so let me just put my point over. The rail network is not currently catering for people who would like to go on the railway because it's too prohibitively expensive. There has to be a massive rethink.
So why not nationalise it, Mark?
Wait a minute, excuse me for one moment. I agree. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. So please, what I'm saying is, yes, people have lost sight of it. And when I say the people who've lost sight of it, I'm talking about the decision makers who actually get free rail passes and all the rest of it. It doesn't really matter to them because they won't be paying for it. It's people like us who will have to be paying for it. It's not within our reach. That's why, unfortunately, we have to go on the cars. And for this guy to turn around and say it's going to be a saving of 44 billion, I've heard enough of it over the last 10 to 12 years of these analysts saying, yes, it's going to all work out fine. It's quite clear that figures have been manipulated. I will change my mind if I can see the evidence. But personally, from what the presenters just said, I'm going to use a word that he said. I am a reasonable fella, and I cannot see how it's going to save 44 billion. I think we're being conned. I'd like to see the evidence, and then I would make an apology, but I just can't see it. And I cannot see, for the life of me, why rail travel from Portsmouth to London won't cost £20 return, because it puts people out.
Profit.
Thank you.
It's too much profit.
We're going to leave it there.
Yeah.
Brian, thank you. Mark, thank you. Thank you all. It's 9:35.
On digital and online.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
Now, 5 Live Breakfast.
Your call.
With Nikki Campbell. Call 0500 909 693. Calls are free from most landlines, but some networks and mobile operators will charge. Text 85058. Text will be charged at your standard message rate. This is 5 Live.
Loads of texts coming in on this and calls too. It's Graham in Manchester, John in Telford. We've got Christian Wilmar, and we also have Julie Mills. And Julie is very supportive of this high-speed rail link, director of Green Gauge 21. And Christian, a well-known voice, a transport commentator. John in Telford, Graham in Manchester. I've got to say, most people on the lines seem to be against this line. Graham, you go.
Well, I am totally against this particular line. I think it's a ridiculous thing to do, quite frankly. There are places such as Newcastle and Preston and Leeds, Liverpool, Manchester. They need something. They need to be shown that they count. Everything seems to me to be biased towards the southern end of this country.
Well, I'm sure Julie will answer that one, because...
Yeah, absolutely. The government is very committed to extending the route beyond the West Midlands, and with branches that serve both Manchester and Leeds. And it's worth remembering that even in the first phase, when we've got a new line between London and West Midlands, there'll be a connection through to the existing railway line. So there'll be fast trains that go through to Manchester, Preston, Glasgow, and all the places in between as well. So it's not just about London West Midlands.
Forgive me if I don't exactly believe everything that a politician tells me.
She's not what a slur, what a calumny. She's not a politician.
She's speaking on behalf of politicians when she states that the lines will be extended. It's the government saying the lines, whichever government. All of them say one thing today, one thing tomorrow. My point being complete point is there is loads and loads, and unfortunately with today's financial situation, of unemployment in the northeast, the extreme northwest and Scotland, and all the money is being spent where? Back down in the southeast. I'm sorry, I feel as though this is the powers that be deciding to extend the home counties through to the north of Warwickshire. I really do. I'm sorry, I think this is an absolute total waste of space.
We've got lots of texts and stuff coming in, but there's one here, a tweet actually, which says, Christian Walmer, it says, let me see now, with peak oil prices, that will mean that road travel will be too pricey, as will flying. This is the best bet for the UK economy in the long run. That's from Rob. It's a tweet to myself, Nikki A.A. Campbell. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think that peak oil will reduce the amount of travel generally across the piece. I think people, all travel will become more expensive. I mean, rail travel will become more expensive as well because, it's dependent on fuel and energy. And I think that, we're living in a period of time when we get around the country far too easily and far too cheaply. All transport is going to become more expensive, and we will look at other ways of communication.
Is this the golden age? Are we going to be looking back on this having been the golden age when it was cheap and easy?
Well, I think that's right.
Oh,
because,
dear.
We've been using this stock of oil that was built up over billions of years, kind of a long time ago, and we're basically running it down. We're in a 200 or 300 year a fantastic period when all our economy is dependent on that energy, and we're going to have to find other ways of getting that energy, and it's going to be more expensive.
Excuse me, it's Graham again. If I may, very briefly before I go off, agree with everything that gentleman has just said. My point is, does it have to start and end in the southeast? My point entirely.
John in Telford. Hello, John.
Hello, Nicky. Nice to speak to you.
And you. What do you think about this?
Well, I love trains. I just wish we had more of them. We've had our trains from Wrexham down through Shropshire to London stopped. Apparently, it's not economical enough. What we've got in this country is, I agree with the speakers who are against this idea, it's not being against trains at all. It's against the ludicrous nature of the government we have, and not just this one, of course. We're going through this huge expenditure, but we're told recently that they want actually less people on the trains because it means they have to get more subsidy for government to have more trains. Laugh, isn't it? It's Monty Python territory, this is. It's ludicrous.
Julie.
Well, I'm not sure I completely recognise that argument. I think all the projections that we've seen has suggested that rail demand is going to carry on increasing, and we need to find a sustainable way of providing that capacity. And what high-speed rail does is actually frees up our existing rail network so that we can have better local services and more freight services on the existing network than we could have without High-Speed 2. And only High-Speed 2 can deliver that. Upgrading the existing railway network isn't going to provide that extra capacity for the local and freight
We
services.
have had discussions on the radio. I've read it in the major newspapers, like the Observer, that they want people not to go on the trains and they want to put up the prices of the trains to keep them off the trains so they won't have to have more subsidy to get more trains. And meanwhile, we're talking about this particular initiative to save about 20 minutes, which will benefit some people in the business community when we have a country now where wages are frozen, people are being made redundant, and we can't afford to run the major services that we need to make this a wholesome country for the communities that live in it.
Let's get Peter in Suffolk. You're pro, and we've got another pro here on our website who says, as a business person in London and Birmingham, we need this kind of project to build the economy. The government must be brave and make these investments for the greater long-term good. That's from Clive in Yarmouth. Peter, do we need this?
Well, I wish we didn't, but I think we absolutely have to have it. I don't want to treat this entirely as a single issue, but since we've got a population growth, I think by 2030, of an additional 10 million people in this country's got to be a pretty efficient business unit, and that includes, I'm afraid, a better transport links. So if this country chooses to have such a high population growth, which we have chosen, it means a massive increase in our infrastructure, and transport goes along with that. I do sympathise with people that have railway lines running through the beautiful countryside. But sorry, our beautiful countryside has almost already been booked for this enormous growth that we're going to have to proceed with. Efficient rail transport is one example of that. There are many others, but I'm not going on the air. You're discussing it as a single issue. Well, it isn't a single issue.
No, it's not.
It's all part to do. It's to do with what we have to prepare for in the future, and we have decided to have a massive population growth. Therefore, that population has to be served, and that means continuous industrial growth in this country, or growth of one sort or another, to feed and
But Julie, you would argue, just before we have the travel news, Julie, you would argue this is not about necessity being the mother of invention. It's about progress, Julie.
Well, absolutely. It's about providing the capacity that we need, but it's about providing that in a way that provides great benefits to people in the Midlands and the North, and takes some of the pressure off the overheating south by reducing journey times substantially, 30 minutes in the first phase alone, and even greater journey time savings going on, and that's what delivers the economic benefit.
Okay. Brian, we haven't been particularly high speed in coming to you, so thank you for hanging on the line.
That's all right.
What do you think?
Well, as you say, I've been hanging on for a little while waiting, so I've had the chance to come up with a bit of a metaphor on this. Right. If you're doing a bit of decorating about the house and you put a nail in the wall and you burst a hot water pipe and you've got water bursting out of the walls, you don't hang a picture over it and say, oh, that looks nice, look at that picture, isn't it a delight? But what we've got is a rail system that actually doesn't work properly as it is. We want to get that one sorted out before we start messing around spending multi-billions on hanging a picture up. You know, it's just as an example, I live in Wellingborough. My partner up until recently lived in St Neots. Both of these towns are pretty much exactly the same distance from London. They run on different lines into and out of London. If you want to turn up at St Neots and get a ticket from the station, at the point at which you wish to travel, you're going to spend £35 on a return travel card. If you turn up at Wellingborough at exactly the same time to make that journey, you're going to spend over £100, simply because you're travelling on a different line. When you challenge the operator of the Wellingborough to London line, which I believe is the East Midlands line, they say, well, you're travelling on an intercity line there, and when you're travelling from St Neots, you're not. Now, I don't care what the line's called. What I want is to be able to turn up at a railway station and buy a ticket and know how much it's going to cost me, regardless of where I'm travelling from. It strikes me that the system needs to be renationalised. And when I say renationalised, I don't mean that we want to go back to the nationalised industry of British Rail, where that was a mess as well. Just because it's renationalised doesn't mean to say that we have to renationalise it in the same way. It just needs to be run effectively. But if it's renationalised so that none of the companies have to worry about paying their shareholders dividends, making money, making profits, the whole thing could be sorted out a lot more effectively. Everybody would know where they stood. You could buy a ticket without having to trawl through half a dozen internet sites trying to get an offer that beats this offer or that offer, or actually isn't an offer when you go back to the website.
Christian, is that an attractive... Christian Wilmore, what Brian says there, is that an attractive prospect for you?
I have a lot of sympathy with what he says. I think that one of the problems with the rail network is, and why it's so expensive, is the way it's been privatised. In fact, the government has accepted that, and they're looking at it now. But, I think HS2 is going to actually make it worse, because it's going to create a two-tier railway. So there's going to be these luxury trains for those who can afford them, Absolutely. And there's going to be the rest of the network for people who can't. And I think that's going to entrench this this terrible dysfunctional railway that we have. Yes, I'm all in favour of bringing it all back together again, because everybody agrees that the way the railway was breaking up and the madnesses Brian is talking about need to be resolved.
Okay, well, let's bring in Richard and George. Richard, hello to you.
Hello there.
And George, good morning to you.
Good morning, Nicky.
George, react to what Richard says if it's relevant to you. Richard, what is your point?
Well, I live in Warwickshire, where I believe so we've been told, there's a medieval woodland, and it is earmarked for the track is going to cut straight through it. Now, I want to know how the lady who's in favour of this rail line can justify such decimation of our already diminished landscape.
Julie.
We'll be hearing further today more details of the actual route and the sustainability appraisal that's being carried out of the route. But it's worth remembering that alternatives to High Speed 2, such as upgrading existing rail network, come with their own disruption. And there's a lot of built-up areas alongside the West Coast Main Line that would be affected by further upgrades of the existing route.
Richard,
how fast does your Virgin train go?
That goes
what sort of speeds do they go on the existing lines?
That goes up to 125 miles an hour on existing
125.
lines.
And in a country that's a fifth of the size of France, I can understand in France and in Europe when you're travelling thousands of miles, the advantage of a high speed train. And by the way, I've travelled in France, and it's not the general rule that they're high speed. I mean, the main ones going, to the trans-European lines. Yes, you get your high-speed trains, but your average train isn't a high-speed train.
That's very true. George, what do you want to say?
Well, I think that what was said earlier about the fact that trains are so expensive, part of the reason why it's so expensive to go in the morning is because we don't have any capacity. They're putting the fares up because there literally isn't any more room for people to go on the trains. So we need more capacity. I'm not saying that the rail industry is completely
less first class, more standard class.
Could I just come in with on a pricing point?
Of course, yeah.
Okay. I live in Warwickshire. My parents are down in Hampshire. So an off-peak train ticket costs me for an open return. Say I want to go down for the weekend and come back whenever. I think it's about £60. Now I've got a Range Rover. It runs on LPG, so it's there's my eco bit there. But it costs me around £40. Never get stuck in traffic jams. The M40 is a great motorway. I hit the M40 down the A36, then into Hampshire. Takes me an hour less in time.
That's unsustainable, though, isn't it? Because you're also having to pay for your car maintenance, your road tax, your insurance. Petrol's only going to go up. I know it's a separate issue, but HS2 could be powered by nuclear power plants, and it will be carbon neutral, which is key. Other forms of transport won't be carbon neutral in the long run. Building more roads, building more runways is only going to increase CO2 emissions.
Well, thank you all very much indeed for those lively contributions this morning. Most of our callers, I think I would say, against this idea.